It's Friday night, guys. We're going to look at some of the latest news going on in the UK. This is the Newsround. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is REGANELITE here with another episode of Newsround every Friday. These are recorded the day before, just for reference. And we're going to start with The Guardian here with the headline of UK taxpayers are left footing the bill as number of fraudulent COVID loans soar. So you remember during the COVID pandemic, obviously a lot of money was wasted. Yeah, let's have a look more into it, guys. So the figures show that lenders flagged nearly 1.7 billion of government-backed loans for potential fraud at the end of June. UK taxpayers have been forced to cover a larger bill for COVID support to companies than expected after fresh government data showed the amount of pandemic business loans flagged for fraud had jumped to 43%. Surely that's not going to jump more, hopefully not. Figures released by the Department for Business and Trade show that high street banks and other private lenders which were responsible for distributing government-backed loans during the COVID crisis had flagged nearly £1.7 billion worth of loans for potential fraud at the end of June. That marks a 43% rise from the 1.1 billion flagged 3 months earlier. It's so frustrating. The suspected fraud figures are also higher than the last set of government estimates, leaving the public footing a larger bill than expected for loans that have gone sour. The vast majority of the loans flagged for fraud are from the £47 billion bounce back loan scheme, which allows small businesses to borrow up to £50,000 apiece during the COVID crisis in order to keep them afloat amid the rolling lockdowns. The loans were distributed to everyday lenders but were 100% guaranteed by the government, meaning that losses, including any due to defaults or fraud, will be covered by the taxpayer. The scheme allowed commercial banks to run fewer checks on small businesses in order to make sure money was distributed to businesses at speed. That left it more superstitious to scammers who were reportedly to have spent tens of thousands of pounds on government-backed loans on anything from Range Rovers to pornographic websites. Oh, God. In total, about £1.65 billion worth of bounce-back loans have been flagged for fraud at the end of June, according to the latest COVID loan figures. The government has so far paid out £1.3 billion of that total to banks to cover the lenders' losses. The figure is already higher than the £1.1 billion in the business department estimates that would be lost due to fraud and error through the scheme. The government had originally estimated that nearly £5 billion could be at risk, but has since revised down their estimates. I wouldn't be surprised if it starts rising, if it's rising even more, to be fair, guys. While the government credits the programme for having saved 50,000 businesses and 2.9 million jobs through the COVID crisis, the former Cabinet Office Minister Theodore Anu resigned in protest of the handling of the scheme in January last year, citing the government's woeful efforts to control potential fraud. Banks have been able to get a better sense of real losses as loans fall due for repayment, but the business department is hoping the amount of money banks are claiming for relatively losses will start to decline over time. Since fraudulent loans are likely to be amongst the first to default, it is assured that the proportion of guarantee claim links with loans is a suspected fraud flag should be declined as the scheme matures. Although this will only become apparent over time, the business department said. The government also said lenders were continually adapting their processes for identifying and combating fraud, and that figures will vary from quarter to quarter, both for individual lenders and overall schemes. What's that figure again? 1.7 billion. Guys, 1.7 billion. That's really, really bad. And the government initially said up to 5 billion. But it still doesn't change the fact that, that's a huge amount of money. That money could have made such a difference. I mean, I understand, I'm glad we protected businesses and jobs during the pandemic. That's really important. But it was handled so badly by the government. It was really poorly handled. And we know it was. But these costs, these numbers, this amount of money lost, is just should not have happened, and we expect better. You expect better from our government. Yes, you must expect better, because if you don't, then it is generally frustrating. I'd like to hope that more can be recruited, but as it turns out, it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. But I think it's gonna this may rubble a little bit more than we would like, I would say. But we'll keep an eye on it for sure. So we're going to go from that story to something a bit from Labour here. This is from Sky News. And the headline is: Labour said it would be open to EU migrant quota, sparking Tory criticism. So what's this all about, guys? So Nick Thomas-Symonds says Labour wanted to restore management and control to the immigration system, but the Tories accused the party of wanting to open the door to 100,000 extra illegal migrants. Now, says the Conservative Party, who are responsible for increasing migration in the country already. They can't talk, because migration has gone up since we've left the EU, because of Brexit, and they haven't fixed the problem. All they've done is made it worse. So they can't talk. They really, they're pointing fingers at Labour, saying they're going to make things worse. You guys have made things worse when it comes to immigration. Okay, you guys, the Conservative government, you guys are responsible at the end of the day, and you've done a poor job of it. So, Labour has confirmed it could accept a quota of migrants from the EU under a returns agreement it hopes to strike with the bloc if it wins power at the next general election. Now, this is a way of Labour being able to negotiate a means to be able to handle some migration with the EU. Now, we had a very good system in place with the European Union when it comes to handling migration. We accepted some, but we didn't need to accept too much. I'm glad that Labour are preparing to do something, because we need to have some kind of agreement with the European Union when it comes to migration. Because what we have now, since we left the European Union, is not working, and we're having a case of migrants just sitting in hotels, in barges at one point, and all sorts of places. They're being dumped, and they're not allowed to work, and they're just getting paid off the taxpayer while their process is being claimed, which is taking absolutely forever. We need a solution, and I'd like to think that this is a start of something from Labour on this one. The Shadow Cabinet Officer Minister Nick Thomas-Symonds said the objective was to secure a returns settlement to establish management and control of the system, as he accused the Conservatives of having lost control of our borders. They have lost control of our borders, guys. Let's just call it what it is. Mr Thomas-Symonds spoke to Sky News while Sir Keir Starmer and Shadow Home Secretary of Vancouver met European officials in The Hague. And as the party unveiled proposals to treat smuggling gangs on par with terrorists, the potential for a returns agreement has already attracted controversy, with Tory peer Greg Hands accusing Labour of shockingly opening the door on policy on immigration. You guys opened the door on immigration by leaving us not part of the European Union. The EU is currently working on new returns agreements that would mean each member state would take a minimum of annual quota of 30,000 migrants, or pay €20,000, that's £17,200, for each person they do not accept. Mr Thomas-Symonds told Sky News, what we are looking to do as an objective is a returns agreement. At the moment, the government is in a position to return people already to particular countries. They are not fast-tracking that situation, and they're not doing that completely. Complementary? I'm losing my words there. What we would be looking for is management and in control of the system, which is absolutely vital and not there under under this government. Yeah, the Home Secretary has no control of this whatsoever. All we get is rhetoric. She tried to put them on a barge that wasn't even deemed safe, that water that could actually kill them. They didn't even follow any procedures, and just wanted to make a PR stunt, and it just turned out to be an absolute disaster. They're not coming up with solid solutions. This is a start, is what I would say from Labour. I'm saying it's not the solution, but it is a start to something, at least. Because the Conservatives are kind of been going around in circles here and telling us that they need to stop the boats. And they're not doing anything about it. A lot of tough talk, Very little action. When we put to him on Sky News that the UK is 13% of Europe's population and therefore could have to accept the same percentage of migrants under an agreement, equating to around 182,000 people per year, Mr. Thomas Simmons said he did not accept the figure. He said the exact details would be a potential future Labour government to negotiate with the EU. You're going to be hamstrung here. We're going to be hamstrung either way on this one. Our position is that net migrations has been too high in the UK and we want to see that coming down. That's our overall position and something we obviously take into any negotiation with the EU, he said. Labour also want to have more UK police officers posted in Europol for joint investigations aiming to disrupt the gangs before they reach the coast, and work with EU partners on data and intelligence sharing, replacing access to UK lost to certain programs after Brexit. Yes, 100% in agreement of this. We need to engage more with Europe in order to help mitigate these things. And this is the right stuff I'm hearing here from Labour. So I do accept that. Rishi Sunak hit back at Labour's assertion that the government had lost control of its borders and claimed Sir Keir Starmer's plan would see the UK accept 100,000 migrants from the EU every year, although he did not say how he calculated this figure. I'll tell you how he calculated it. He allegedly made it up. Speaking to broadcasters on his visit to Devon, the Prime Minister said that the Labour leaders spent all of this year voting against our Stop the Boats bill, the toughest legislation that any government has passed to tackle illegal migration. It's not making a difference. He added, I don't think it's credible that he really wants to get a grip this problem. But Shadow Attorney General Emily Thornberry told the BBC that the figure was fantasy, adding, it is just embarrassing, is it? Honestly, they seem to have absolutely no plan at the moment, and we said this is a reasonable way of proceeding, and they get completely hysterical. In August, the Times reported Mr Sunak was also attempting to secure a returns agreement with the EU, but that negotiations stalled. It is likely any agreement would have involved the UK taking a share of EU migration. Downing Street today told reporters that the government was open to a returns deal with the EU, but would not accept a quota of migrants in exchange. Well, then you've got nothing to bring to the table. What have you got to bring to the table? You can't give them money. Apparently, we have no money, don't we? So what can the UK offer the EU at this point? There's no, this is you're going to have to accept a quota of migrants because you've got to offer something. The Prime Minister's official spokesman did not rule out the possibility of funding deals which could see the UK taxpayers' money go to Brussels as part of an agreement. Yeah, I had a feeling about UK taxpayer money going to Brussels in some sort of deal. There are discussions ongoing, so I'm not going to get into whether or not we would not fund any further cooperation, the spokesman said. In his interview with the Times, the Labour leader said he would treat people smugglers like terrorists by freezing their assets and restricting their movements. Well, good luck doing that when they're outside the UK. Speaking from The Hague, Sir Keir Starmer told broadcasters the government has lost control of its borders, and we can see that with the number of crossings there are across the channel in small boats. We have to stop that. He said the only way to do that is to smash the gangs that are running this vile trade, and he said he has been speaking to Europol today about getting a closer agreement to tackle it. That he's taking control of the situation that the government has totally lost control of, he declared. Sir Keir rejected assumptions that such a deal with Europe would be a betrayal of the 2016 Brexit referendum. He said the only way to defeat the gangs is to operate where they are operating, which is in Europe and beyond. Asked about Home Secretary Suella Braverman's claim that his plan would make Britain's Europe a dumping ground for millions of illegal migrants, Sir Keir said it's embarrassing that the government is pumping out this nonsense. I can only assume it's because they've got nothing sensible to say on the issue, he said. More than 23,000 people have made the dangerous journey across the channels in this year so far, with over 3,000 making the crossing in September alone. September alone, that's crazy. Mr Sunak has made tackling the issue as one of the 5 priorities for the year, promising to stop the boats with measures such as supporting some migrants to Rwanda and housing people on barges. Both of them have so far failed. Both the schemes have hit barriers, with Rwanda flights caught up in the courts and an outbreak of leukemia disease on the Bibi Stockholm vessel. Mr Sunak has repeatedly defended the government's progress, saying We have already reduced the legacy backlog by over 28,000, nearly a third since the start of December, and we remain on track to meet our target. Let's be clear, yeah, they're not. When they say they're clearing the backlog, yeah, and it's important to stress this. Some of it is a case of just dumping them somewhere in the country and claiming they've been processed, they're done, sort of thing, or they've disappeared off the system, no idea where they've gone, and they shrug their shoulders, sort of thing. Is basically what another way of them looking at it. But it's a start of something. Obviously, I think the obvious solution to dealing with the migration, especially the stopping the boats, is to set up a legal route in Calais. That would be the simplest solution, and process them on that side of the island. That way you stop the smugglers from bringing them over completely. But there appears to be no sign of Labour wanting to do that, as well as the Conservatives. That would be the obvious solution, but it appears Labour at least have something, but we'll have to wait and see what they have in their manifesto closer to a general election, that is for sure. That's where their policy stands on that at the moment anyway. Moving on, guys, we're going to look at this one from iNews. So the headline here from iNews is that Sunak gives China the green light to build UK nuclear plants, despite the nation being a threat to our way of life. So the government has rejected calls for Chinese state-linked firms to be excluded entirely from Britain's nuclear sector. We don't. The power plants are not the way. Wind and solar is our way. Well, wind specifically is the power that we can rely on much more, considering we are on, I don't know, an island. Okay, we don't get the best sunshine. Okay, when it comes, but I still think solar power is definitely something we should be investing more in. Nuclear, we don't need nuclear, in my opinion. That's my personal opinion. China will not be permanently barred from investing in Britain's nuclear energy, despite posing a threat to our open and democratic way of life, the government has said. Ministers were accused of patronising and misleading approach by senior Conservatives after ruling out a ban on insisting existing rules on China are already tough enough. A committee on MPs suggested that allowing firms with links to the Beijing regime to be involved in a civil nuclear sector provided an incentive and opportunity for espionage. That's exactly what it is. Like, if they have links to the Beijing regime, like, just don't let them in. Like, if we believe that, I wouldn't say outright ban Chinese companies, but then again, you don't know for certain if they're linked with the Chinese government. I mean, you know, I'm spitballing right now on that speculation, because I think it is wrong that there are some Chinese companies that aren't affiliated with the government. But should they be exempt as well? You know, I think that's a sort of thing. I mean, obviously, if they're linked to the government, with the Chinese government, it can't be trusted. They have one of the highest, one of the biggest. They have one of the biggest spy agencies in the world, actually, believe it or not. China. I think it was spy agency that was said on the Rest is Politics podcast, but I diverse. In its response, the government said it would consider new ways to scrutinise China's involvement in Hickory Point C, which is already well underway, but would not impose a blanket ban. It said the government will continuously review measures to ensure that the economic security and critical national infrastructure is protected. All investment involved in critical infrastructure is subject to thorough scrutiny and needed to satisfy strong legal, regulatory and national security requirements. Future nuclear projects would be subject to these individual assessments, in which the government characterises as a one-step-at-a-time approach. Although a Chinese firm has already been bought out by Sizewell's C project, which was originally an investor. The Parliament Intelligence and Security Committee had said in a report first published in July that allowing Chinese companies to extend influence over the UK's civil, nuclear and energy sectors accounts to stifling control to the Chinese Communist Party. So Ian Duncan Smith, the former Conservative leader, hit out at the government's response, saying it looks pretty patronising and rather flat. And Sir Julian Lewis, chair of the Intelligence and Security Committee, attacked claims that its report did not take updated policies into account. He said, "It is misleading repeatedly to imply, as the government does, that our findings are outdated. Until 2 months before the publication, we monitored all relevant developments and noted them throughout the report. This was not difficult to do given the glacial pace at which the government's China policy is developed. Introducing the government's response, Mr Sunak accepted that China poses a number of dangers to the UK, writing, "I'm acutely aware of the particular threats to our open and democratic way of life." Well, if that is the case, then just don't allow China to invest. Just don't risk it. You know, if there's a risk and there's a possibility, excuse me, then just don't let them in. That's the way. Prime Minister said it was necessary to protect the integrity of our democracy from the threats of foreign interference and understand how disproportionate communities in the United Kingdom are threatened by foreign states, as well as defending against cyber attacks on Parliament and individual politicians. In the response, the government rejected calls to provide all universities with a list of research areas which should be considered particularly sensitive and therefore require additional supervision when Chinese nationals are involved, it said. The complexity of the research subjects combined with the pace of development is such that any single definitive list of sensitive areas of research would not capture sufficient detail and would be quickly out of date. The intelligence service are monitoring China's target of current and former civil servants. The government also confirmed with all current officials undergoing regular re-vetting to ensure they have not become a danger to security. The committee warned that its work had been undermined by a number of intelligence operatives now working from home, saying the response to our request for information has slowed dramatically as a result, but the government said it would continue to provide opportunities for staff to work from a wider range of locations, rather than cracking down on spies home working. Theresa May had backed Rishi Sunak's strategy of balancing economic ties with security. She told Bloomberg, "The debate about China often seems to be what I described earlier in absolute terms, is that either you ignore China or you're completely in with China. The answer is, of course, is that it's right to be neither of those. You can't ignore China's huge economic pressure across the world." She's not wrong. She's not wrong, guys. There is a catch-22. When the UK was pressured by America not to invest its 5G upgrade its 5G network under Huawei, which was a Chinese firm, and they claimed they did not have ties to the Chinese government, but Britain was pressured by the US not to invest in them, and when in the end we didn't. And this time around here, it seems here we're quite lenient on them. But here's a catch-22, to be fair, because yes, China is a threat to us, but at the same time, China has one of the biggest economies on the planet, and why would you not want to be a part of that economy, So it's a difficult one, to say the least, I would say, on that is for sure, guys. We're going to go next to the BBC, guys, but just before we do, I'm just going to make sure this is in place. If you can hit the like button, that would be greatly appreciated, and if you can share across other social media platforms, that would be really helpful. And if you like the content and you want to see more of it, click the subscribe button down there as well. It'd be greatly appreciated. So let's look into this next one. This one is from the BBC, as I said. The headline that Rishi Sunak inadvertently broke the code of conduct in his wife's shares probe. So Rishi Sunak broke the MP's code of conduct when Downing Street confirmed to journalists details of the Parliamentary Standards investigation. The probe was into the Prime Minister's failure to correctly declare his wife Ashkashana, my sincere apologies, Murray's financial interest in a childminding company. Yeah, apologies if I mispronounced the name. Number 10 should not have commented beyond what it was publicly known about, the Common Standards Committee had said. But this was a minor and inadvertent rule breach, it added. The probe subsequently found Mr Sunak had failed to declare Ms Murray's interest in the childminding agency property. In a report in August, Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards Daniel Greenberg called that inadvertent, saying it arose from confusion about the rules. Mr Sunak accepted the conclusion and apologised. The latest ruling from cross-party Common Standard Committee follows a finding by Mr Greenberg that the Prime Minister broke Rule 13 of the MP's Code of Conduct relating to confidentiality. Yeah, the PM failed to correctly declare his interests. The PM's wife holds share funds in Budget Boost. The MP is told to apologise after breaking breach of code. This forbids parliamentarians from disclosing details of any investigation by the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards experts when required by law to do so or authorised by the Commissioner. In April, Number 10 provided a statement to the media containing details of Mr Greenberg's investigation into concerns Mr Sunak had not properly disclosed the information about Mrs Murray's share in the childcare agency called Kids that benefited from the March budget. Whilst it was open to the media to speculate, when Mr Sunak spokesperson confirmed to the media that the inquiry related to Mr Sunak's links to a childcare firm in which his wife is an investor, he disclosed details about the inquiry, the Commissioner said. The Standard Committee did not recommend any sanctions against the Prime Minister, given the nature of the rule breach. In an 18-page report, it concluded this was a minor breach and an inadvertent breach of the code. If this had not been the Prime Minister, guys, do you think it would have been different? If it had been a cabinet minister or just an MP, do you think it would have been a slap on the wrist as well? Because I don't think so. I think just because he's the Prime Minister, he's been given a slap on the wrist and just let go. Mr Sunak's staff should not have issued any statement about the details of the case under investigation without the approval of Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards. The Commissioner has made clear that it had no impact on his inquiry. Nevertheless, it constitutes a breach that should not have occurred. However, Mr Sunak acknowledged that with hindsight, he would have followed a different course of action. We will remind the Prime Minister and all ministers, like all other MPs, that it is their responsibility as individuals to ensure that such breaches do not occur. The Commissioner noted that Mr Sunak had indicated that with hindsight he would have made the arrangements to restrict the disclosure of information by his office on his behalf. Liberal Democrat Chief Whip Wendy Chamberlain described it as another breach of the rules by Rishi Sunak and his chaotic Conservative government, accusing him of continuing the same old sleaze and scandals as under Boris Johnson. Last week, Conservative MP Marcus Fish was ordered by the Standards Committee to apologise to the Commons for speaking to the media about a separate, then ongoing investigation by Mr Greenberg. Oh dear, guys. I mean, it's just he's essentially just gotten away with it, guys. To be fair, I mean, let's just call it what it is. You know, got away with it. Yeah, lucky him, guys. Is all I'll say. Well, you know, when you're the Prime Minister, you get special privileges, obviously. But remember, this is a Prime Minister that we, as public, did not vote for as well. Hashtag Mr. Inaction Man. Next one here is from the Independent, guys. This one kind of did just dropped recently from the time of recording this, and it's exclusive from them too. The headline is Anti-vax MP Andrew Bridgen charges taxpayers for Twitter premium to promote COVID conspiracies. Yeah. The outspoken MP, kicked out of the Conservative Party for comparing the COVID-19 vaccine rollout to the Holocaust, has claimed Twitter paid services on his expenses. So he got Twitter Blue or Twitter Premium, and we as taxpayers have paid for it. Yeah. An MP who compares COVID vaccines to the Holocaust has been charging taxpayers for Twitter Premium, the Independent can reveal. Andrew Bridgen, the outspoken North West Leicestershire MP who was kicked out of the Conservative Party after his comments, has claimed Twitter paid services on his expenses. Mr Bridgen billed the expenses, which gives users of X, formerly known as Twitter, expanded reach, prioritised tweets and other premium features, as an office cost for software and applications. So far, taxpayers have stumped up just £100 to fund Mr Bridgen's account. Yeah, it costs £100. I think it's like you can pay for a year for like £100 or £110, and then there's like a monthly one if you wanted to pay as well. I mean, I have X, but I'm not paying for the blue tick. I mean, if someone wants to donate £100 to buy me a coffee or Patreon and say, yeah, have blue tick so I can actually have more activities, that would be nice, but I'm not going to make anyone do that, to be fair. And I don't think it's fair that we as taxpayers should be paying for something like this. I think it's pretty pathetic, if I'm honest. I mean, we're wasting enough taxpayers' money as it is, and this is being wasted on a premium for social media. Like, what nonsense could this more be? The page has railed against so-called gender ideology and continues to question the effectiveness of the COVID vaccine. Since losing the Tory whip, Mr Bridgen has joined former actor Lawrence Fox Reclaim Party, defies calls to resign his seat and contest a by-election in which Labour's candidate in northwest Leicestershire, urging him to put his extreme views to the test. Reclaim was formed to challenge woke autocracy and rails against the notion of white privilege and systematic racism. Its website claimed to promote freedom of speech, in which it views as being under grave peril, with Mr Fox previously criticising the climate hoax and COVID scam. Mr Bridgen is currently suing the former Health Secretary Matt Hancock for libels after Matt Hancock said his comments were disgusting and dangerously anti-Semitic, anti-vax and anti-scientific conspiracy theories. Commons leader Penny Mordaunt says she pities Mr Bridgen if he believes the claims he is making. Something we agree with Penny Mordaunt. No, we don't really pity him, do we? I think someone has, he's just absolutely lost his mind, in my opinion. I think making the claims and stuff that he's making is just ridiculous, really. If you have solid evidence to back up the claims, please provide it, but don't just kick and scream and shout about it. Normally the best thing to do, is not to respond to them on social media. That's my best recommendation. She said she should check his behaviour if he does not believe the claims, and he has repeated them for another matter. Mrs Mordaunt has also advised Mr Bridgen to research some of the claims he has made, with one post on Twitter alienating the US Department of Defence was responsible for both the virus and the vaccines. Where is your evidence for such a claim? Where is the evidence for such a claim? Mr Fox, who leads Mr Bridgen's party and stood unsuccessfully in the recent Uxbridge by-election, was recently cleared of wrongdoing after he was filmed setting fire to a row of Pride Progress flags on Father's Day. The Independent has contacted Mr Bridgen for comment. I imagine he's probably not going to respond to that, guys. But yeah, I think this man has clearly lost his mind, in my opinion. His comments, his claims, are damaging and poisoning the minds of innocent people, guys, and it needs to stop. It really does need to stop. If you want a solution to these kind of people, ignore them. Don't give them the energy. Don't give them your time. And the only reason I'm highlighting it is to remind you of how dangerous this man is, and to also highlight the fact that we as taxpayers are paying for his social media, which is absolutely bang out of order, because we're already having our taxpayer money being thrown away as it is. So that's already frustrating enough as it is, guys. Whew. 33 minutes in, guys. I've got 2 more articles for you guys. Looks like this is going to be a much shorter news round than expected, which is not a bad thing as well. Sometimes an hour can be a long video to watch, guys. So this next one we got is from Open Democracy. Not for the faint-hearted, I'm just going to say that now, guys. But let's dive into it. The headline is domestic violence victims are being made homeless and or forced to live with abusers. In some cases, survivors have been sexually or physically assaulted after councils failed to house them, guys. Not good at all. Domestic violence victims are being forced to keep living in their abusers or live on the streets because councils are failing to house them. One charity told Open Democracy of a case in which a woman had to sleep in her car for 2 weeks, during which time the council phoned her abusive ex-pastor to ask if she could move back in. Did they know? She slept in her car for 2 weeks. The council phoned her abusive ex-partner to ask if she could move back in. Couldn't put her anywhere else at all. Wow. I'm sorry, but that's just... Like, I understand that this woman is in desperate need of a home. But the council here, to me, the audacity to have to call her abusive ex-partner to ask if she can move back in. Wow, I'm sorry, but that's just disgraceful. That is so disgraceful. Like I understand there's a housing issue. I really understand that, but for the council to do that. Now, obviously, let's make one thing clear. If the council is not aware of the abuse that's happening here, if the council was aware of it and still called up, then I'd be a lot more madder. But if the council wasn't aware that this was happening, maybe it'd be a different scenario. I don't know. But let me know what you guys actually think of that, because I'm quite struck a chord by this just on this alone. More than 10% of investigations into council housing services concern survivors of domestic abuse, Open Democracy's analysis has found. They include cases where survivors have been sexually or physically assaulted by their abusers after councils failed to house them. Councils have a legal obligation to urgently provide housing to anyone made homeless after fleeing domestic abuse without prejudice or without asking for evidence. Apologies. They also have an obligation to rehouse survivors if their new homes is unsuitable or leave them at risk of further abuse. But Charity Refuge told Open Democracy survivors are being asked to provide evidence of their abuse by councils. And how would you like them to provide that? Oh, do they need to show you do they need to show the councils, oh yeah, here's the bruises, like, oh, what about the black eye I have? Is that not enough evidence to you? Or do they need to show you the private parts, to show you that the abuse has taken place? Like, where is the humanity here? Evidence of abuse, like, really? One woman told us she was made to feel like a criminal when she was asked a council for housing support. Having been refused help, is now at risk of being declared intentionally homeless. Open Democracy analysed local government ombudsman reports and found at least 55 of 535 cases in the 2022-2023 financial year relating to council housing provision for domestic abuse survivors. In one case in Enfield, North London, a woman was put into temporary accommodation in the borough when she became homeless after fleeing domestic abuse, only for a former partner to access the property and attack her. Okay, so first and foremost, I want to know, is that person in jail? Has he been charged? And is she okay? I just want to know if she's okay. The council moved her but failed to fix a broken door at the new property for 11 months, during which time the house was broken into. When council officers eventually offered her a house, it was close to the prison her ex-partner was in. And despite being warning of the risks, the council, if she didn't take it, she would be refused further support, leaving her homeless. Enfield Council apologised and paid the victim £3,338 before being ordered to pay an additional £3,262. Wow. So you made her go there. In Tower Hamlets, East London, a woman said she was sexually assaulted by a former partner after council's delays in moving her from an address that she'd become aware of. A month earlier, council had lowered the priority of her case as it deemed her abuser was no longer posed a high risk to the family. The ombudsman had found the council was not at fault, partly because the woman said she had not wanted to move into emergency accommodation. In another Tower Hamlets case, a woman was awarded £500 after the council failed to offer the permanent security housing for 10 months after she fled an abusive partner, despite admitting it had a duty to house her. And Bristol Council failed to adequately support a victim of domestic abuse after accidentally allocating a home on her street to a relative of her attacker. Bristol acknowledged its error and vowed not to repeat it. Like that one about the Bristol Council one, my first thinking is that, like, are they like talking to the victim here and saying, you know, in these instances, are they saying to them, like, is this okay, like, or like, did the victim know that there were relatives on that street? If the victim knew there were relatives related to the abuser on that street, did she tell the council? And did the council, you know, or did the council just put her there and she wasn't aware of the abuser on the same street? I think that's worth asking as well. Yeah, it's tough, guys. It's tough. Like, just before I go any further, I just want to make this clear here. Obviously, like, you guys know I've covered a lot of council stuff recently on the channel, and they've had a very hard time as it is. These councils, when it comes to, they are struggling with homes. They are struggling so badly with homes, and I've got to be, like, I'm going to be brutally honest here. We cannot outright blame the councils for this, okay? And the reason why you can't outright blame the councils for these mistakes is because the councils don't have enough homes, okay? They don't have enough homes. We do know this, guys. We've covered this. You've not just heard it from me, you've heard it from other YouTubers. We don't have enough homes in this country. And the councils are, I think it's fair to say, the vast majority of them are off their feet. They have debts. They have difficult, hard decisions to make. And they are trying absolutely everything and anything in their powers to do what is best for where they are. And I would say the same. I would say that the majority of them are trying to do that again for these victims, but they are struggling to do that. Are they making mistakes here? Clearly, some of these mistakes are terrible. Is it purposeful? On purpose? I don't think some of them are on purpose. I think there's some human error into it. Some of them there with about giving evidence. I think for the abuse, I think that's flat out wrong, and I think the councils need to be put in question. But this all stems back to austerity again, and the cost of living crisis, and the failure to build enough homes, and it all coming back to that, really. In the end of the day, the problems and what we have in this country lie at the feet of number 10 Downing Street. They lie at the feet of the Conservative Party, who have been in power for 13 goddamn years. And it's easy to point the finger at a Labour council if you've been in a Labour seat for so long. But at the end of the day, the money that they get, the houses that they're able to build in their areas, you know, it's all tied to government at the moment. The funds they get are from the government, the Conservative government, and it's important to stress that. And I feel so sorry, because these people are being victims and are trying to get away from their abusers, and the councils, some of them, are already off their feet with so much to do and are trying to do everything they can, and they're making some of these errors. So I strongly sympathise with the victims, but I also have some sympathy with the councils and the situations that they are in as well, and I think it's important to remember that. Ruth Davison, Chief Executive of Refuge UK, the largest domestic abuse charity, said the failings were having catastrophic consequences for survivors. She added, "It is imperative that we overcome these failings so survivors are not left with having to choose between staying with dangerous perpetrators and becoming homeless." Davison said the charity had seen a growing number of local authorities gatekeeping access to social housing for survivors of abuse by delaying decisions, telling survivors incorrect information and wrongly asking for evidence of their abuse. Diana left an abusive partner in 2020, taking her 2 young children with her. She initially lived off savings but soon began to run out. I had to start to claim universal credit, which did not cover my rent, she tells Open Democracy. Earlier this year, after months of looking for places in domestic violent refuge that were either full or too far from London for her to access her son's doctors, she went to North London Council for help. However, she's told she didn't have responsibility to house her because she was low risk and did not have a current place in a refuge. She was offered help sourcing a private rented property with her universal credit housing budget, something almost impossible for her to do in her borough, meaning she had to choose between living in an overcrowded studio flat or leaving her support network in the capital. Something she said her caseworker pushed her to do. They speak to you in this way. It's like gaslighting you, basically, and not taking your concerns seriously at all, she recalls. There's me speaking about councils in these difficult situations, but they're saying that they're gaslighting people and trying to push them into this situation. To hear from a specialist is the worst thing in the world when you're wanting help. As if for the council are saying you don't deserve this, we're going to treat you like a criminal just to prevent you from trying to get help. In the end, Dinah only received a discretionary housing payment to help pay the rent, but even this is now set to be withdrawn as the council claims she has rejected housing. In fact, she has not been offered housing by the council, but a place in a refuge in Colchester she didn't take. They know full well I can't afford to live without that money, she adds. I just don't know what's going to happen. In the majority of cases where the LGO ruled councils failed to meet their legal duties to support survivors, they were only asked to apologise. A small number of cases involved cash settlements, almost way below £1,000. The LGO has published 2 reports on councils' failure to meet their housing duties since 2020, with one outlining failure in a case involving a survivor of domestic abuse. With another report in 2021, it warned delays by councils to offer to support domestic abuse victims were leaving vulnerable people at risk for longer than necessary. Charity says the problems have been growing for years, driven by a lack of council funding, a shortage of social housing, and a chronic lack of places at refuge. Repeated failures now mean that some victims are not even trying to seek help. Tougher, as Solace Women's, a charity of Solace Women's Aid, says London councils are regularly asking survivors to move to housing as far as Manchester, where they will have no support. She also cited a case where councils had taken 2 weeks to house someone fleeing domestic abuse. Because they're trying to get them off the books, the London borough councils are just trying to get them off the books. But the problem is that London is where the money is, and people don't want to move from one part of the country to another for obvious reasons. So it's not right that they try to push them up into a place where they don't have any support, any friends anywhere else. It's just not fair, in my opinion. The local authority actually went back to call the perpetrator to ask if they could come back home, she recalls. That was a failure in itself, but on top of that they were told to go back home that evening. Obviously they couldn't go back at home, so they slept in their car with their child. Tara added, we've had cases where services users have gone back home to their perpetrator just because housing hasn't been provided. I think housing is one of the biggest issues in what we do, to get them out of that home, to get them out of a place where they're safe, so we can all start all that other support. As Diana put it, it's like a full-time job dealing with this. It doesn't ever stop. Names have been changed to protect anonymously. Guys, just going to put this here. Childline, a free 24-hour confidential helpline for children and young people who need to talk. The phone line for it is 0800 1111. The website is Childline there. Also, as well, it's the National Domestic Abuse Helpline for women experiencing domestic abuse, their family, friends, and others calling on their behalf. The number there is 0808 2000 427. The website is the 24-hour National Domestic Abuse Helpline. There's a website for refuge, a website for women's aid there to support. There's also one for men's advice line and a phone number for for male victims of domestic abuse, offering support to help men keep themselves and their children safe. 0808 801 0327. There's also one there for the National Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual and Trans Domestic Violence Helpline there as well. The number is 0800 999 5428 with the website GALOP. And finally, the advocacy after fatal domestic abuse. It's a free specialist advocacy and peer support for those who are grieved by a death following domestic abuse, including homicide, suicide and unexpected deaths. The website, the AADFA. If you guys want, I can put the links for them for you guys there. If you really want them, let me know in the comments down below after this has come out, if you want me to add them, but they are there on the screen for you guys. Yeah, that's pretty brutal, to say the least. It's never good to talk about these things, but I feel for the councils, but at the same time, if that's the attitude of the councils really need to knock bang some heads together there, because I think it's bang out of order if they're treating people like that. I mean, I know councils are struggling right now, but you know, can we talk about the human aspect here for 1 second? You know, but I've spoken enough about it, guys. So we've got one more story to talk about, guys. This one is from Byline Times. Don't forget, before I switch over, to like, share and subscribe if you can. It really would help support the channel, and I appreciate everybody who's come by and watched this. I really do appreciate it. So the headline, this is: Sunak's government is accused of allowing UK businesses to profit from Chinese slave labour. Human rights group says the UK is turning a blind eye to human rights abuses in China. Well, considering that they're kind of letting China run already, letting some of China's businesses have power have investment in UK nuclear power plants, this one is quite worrying, to say the least. So the UK is failing to do enough to prevent goods produced from using forced labour in China from being sold in the UK, charities and business groups have warned. Human rights groups have told Byline Times that the UK is falling behind its international allies, creating the risk that it could be becoming a dumping ground for tainted goods. The claims come just over a week after Foreign Secretary James Cleverly visited China, the most senior UK figure to do so in more than 5 years. During the visit, he claimed to have made clear the UK's strength of feeling about the mass incarceration of the Uyghur people in Jiangling. Apologies for the mispronunciations of names. However, charities, campaigners and businesses all said that the existing British legislation named the Modern Slavery Act was insufficient to tackle the problem in the Jiangling region. The US estimates that at least 100,000 people in the minority Uyghur ethnic group are still being subject to state-sanctioned forced labour in camps, in which some is described as a genocide. Other estimates are far higher. However, products sold in the UK are still likely to contain elements made using this labour. These include clothing, with more than 8% of China's cotton being sourced from the region, and solar panels, with Xilinx accounting for nearly half of solar-grade polystyrene production. Rajamir Makuk, UK director of the World Uyghur Congress, said given the extensive use of forced labour in the Uyghur region, it's plausible that any product from their homeland carries a dark history. A government spokesperson said that modern slavery is a barbaric crime, in which why the government remains committed to tackling the issue of forced labour in supply chains in China and is taking robust action. The Modern Slavery Act, the solution are full of holes. When challenged on its record, the government often points to Modern Slavery Act introduced in 2015, but critics told Byline Times it is failing to properly address the source of forced or cohesive labour across the world. Central to the legislation, which is a requirement on businesses to report on their actions to tackle modern slavery, all companies with revenue of more than £36 million a year must publish a modern slavery statement on their website, which must have been signed off by a director. A report published last year by the Financial Reporting Council found that around 1 in 10 companies have failed to produce a statement or provide a link to one of their websites, a clear breach of the rules. So why is this not being followed up then, if that is the case, guys? Last May, the government said it would introduce fines for non-compliance, but this is yet to be enacted. Why? While around 11,500 modern slavery statements covering 40,000 organisations have been submitted since 2021. But why have we not introduced the fines? What's the hold up? Crucial failings, according to campaigners, is that it's simply reporting a requirement and does not stipulate any real action needs to be taken. Exactly. You've got to have a punishment there in order to force an action on them, at least. And you're not even forcing an action on them. Parika Carrier of the Coalition to End Forced Labour in the UKR region said, there is very little a company is legally required to do. As it stands right now, a company can report that it has taken no steps to identify modern slavery in its supply chain and that it's compliant with the legislation. Even some of the country's biggest businesses are calling for more targeted legislation. Excuse me. The British Retail Consortium, which represents one of the UK's biggest retailers, said the government should introduce mandatory human rights due diligence and appoint an independent anti-slave commissioner. Charles Crowson of the anti-charity Anti-Slavery International said the Act is completely unfit for purpose and wholly insufficient, not only to address forced labour of UKRs, but actually forced labour anywhere in the world. Mahmoud added, the existing Modern Slavery Act falls short of enforcing thorough checks within labour supplies and preventing produce born of UKR forced labour into UK markets. A robust framework is like forced labour provision is vital to ensure rigorous supply chain scrutiny. A government spokesperson says, we encourage companies to monitor their supply chains with rigorous to uncover and remedy any instance of modern slavery they may find to ensure human rights are protected. The US is leading the way. However, even with stronger due diligence legislation, jangling poses a unique problem for companies due to the difficulty of conducting audits in the region. A spokesperson for the Ethical Trade Initiative, which promotes better practices among businesses, said, even enhanced human rights due diligence faces a significant limitations in the country, and it remains difficult to guarantee the absence of UKR's exploitation and state-imposed forced labour from supply chains based there. Last summer, the UKR Forced Labour Prevention Act came into force in the US. It directly bans companies from importing goods tainted by UKR's forced labour. Some countries in the EU are also on the cusp of introducing their own stronger due to diluent legislation. The US law is the only one that specifically targets UKR's forced labour. Last year, roughly 100,000 shipments of solar panels were blocked at the border over fears they may contain parts of the Jiangling. More than a third of these were later released. This month, the chair of the Commons Affair Committee, Conservative MP Alisa Keynes, tabled an amendment to the energy bill warning that the UK solar could be a dumping ground for tainted goods. Rakijika Makut said, it's high time for the UK government enforces an import ban on goods from this region, fortifying our stance against such profound human rights violations. Yasmin Ahmed, UK Director of Human Rights Force, added the Foreign Secretary needs to take action to ensure that no UK business is profiting from the forced labour of UKTARs. It's time for the UK government to follow its lead of the US, Canada and European countries to institute human rights due diligence laws, impose bans and close loopholes in its modern slavery. Minister Cleverly needs to put its words into action. And the government says that Cleverly has subsequently discussed discussions regarding jailings during his visit. This is the last little bit, guys. We're just hitting nearly the hour mark. So what are businesses doing? So the Retail British Consortium said its members have been working closely with the government to tackle slavery, but urged ministers to offer further clarity on how to conduct business responsibly in China. A spokesperson said the BRC believes that the most effective approach to addressing the concerning human rights issues in China requires a government-to-government dialogue, as well as collaboration between government, industry, civil society groups, and representative workers at the centre of these allegations. The solar industry in the UK and Europe has developed a voluntary code of conduct which will require firms to audit their supply chains and more thoroughly. It is due to be rolled out from December. Chris Herrick, Chief Executive of UK Solar Energy, said the industry takes human rights issues very seriously and has been working to improve the supply chain transparency. The Ethical Trading Initiative said it would back a law which requires mandatory human rights due diligence. Businesses that are members are already expected to map supply chains and conduct human rights checks. The government says it has introduced new guidance for businesses on the risk of doing business in Jiangling, as well as enhanced export controls. I mean, it's like we need to have something similar to what the US have, guys. To be fair, off the cuffs of this. Like, we cannot and we should not be taking anything that's involving false labour in any way, shape or form. And we need to be careful where we are getting, not just from these regions, but from anywhere, from China or in other nations that may have deemed it. And in businesses in Britain just need to be careful of that as well. This should apply everywhere, in my opinion. So hopefully that Britain will eventually follow suit, along with America, and soon hopefully the European Union as soon as possible, guys. So we've just hit over the hour mark, guys. Didn't think we would, but we have. If you've watched all the way through, guys, thank you very much for doing so. I really do appreciate it. I hope you found all the information from these news outlets very interesting and hopefully more useful to you. We'll definitely try to keep on top. I'll try and keep on top of it as much as I possibly can. So thanks again for watching. Like, share and subscribe as always, guys, and I hope to catch you all, wait for it, very, very soon. Thank you and take care.